My name is Eleanor Vance, and for a long time, my life in Portland, Oregon was built on a simple principle: doing the right thing, especially when it was hard. I was 34 and had spent the better part of a decade building a career in a field I was proud of. I worked in specialized financial planning for senior citizens, helping them navigate the complex world of retirement funds and long term care insurance. It's a field with a mountain of regulations for a very good reason. York. Life savings of the most vulnerable people in our society. I believed in those rules. They were a shield for the grandparents and great grandparents who trusted us with everything they had. I was good at my job, meticulous, detail oriented. And I actually cared. My clients were not just account numbers to me, they were people with stories, families, and dreams for their golden years. I found a deep satisfaction in making sure they were safe and secure. My world was orderly, my purpose was clear, and I slept. Well, at night, that all changed the day Karen walked in as our new branch manager. She had a smile that never quite reached her eyes, and a vocabulary full of empty corporate buzzwords. From the very beginning, she treated the regulations not as a shield for our clients, but as annoying obstacles to her bonuses. Karen saw our elderly clients as walking dollar signs, and she was always looking for the fastest way to squeeze more out of them. It started small. She would tell us to skip a few pages on the risk assessment forms to save time, or to creatively word a prospectus to downplay the volatility of a certain fund. I would push back gently at first, saying we needed to follow the protocol for our clients' protection and for our own legal safety. Karen would just pat my shoulder and say something like, "Alina, you have to see the big picture. We are empowering our clients, not drowning them in paperwork." Her favorite phrase was, "This is the way it's always been done," which was a lie. She justify any shortcut she wanted to take. The problem escalated when she started pushing a new high-risk, high-fee annuity product on clients who were in their late 80s and 90s, people who needed stability, not a gamble. I saw her in a meeting with an old woman named Mrs. Gable, a sweet widow whose late husband had been a carpenter. She was living on a modest pension, and her husband's savings. Karen was charming her, talking about guaranteed returns and legacy wealth while conveniently glossing over the astronomical surrender fees and the fact that Mrs. Gable would likely not live long enough to see any real benefit. I felt sick to my stomach. This was not just corner cutting, this was preying on people. I knew I had to do something. I went to Karen's boss, the regional director. I laid out my concerns calmly and professionally, with specific examples of the regulations being ignored. I showed him the files where mandatory disclosures were missing. He listened with a bored expression, and when I was done, he just leaned back in his leather chair and said, "Karen is a results getter, Eleanor. She has a different style, but she meets her targets. Maybe you could learn a thing or two from her about efficiency. This is the way it's always been done." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. The chain of command was broken. It was a circle of indifference. I tried twice more, presenting even more damning evidence of borderline criminal activity. Each time I was brushed off and treated like a troublemaker. Caught wind of my efforts, and her demeanor toward me turned icy. She started micromanaging my work, double-checking everything, looking for any tiny mistake to use against me. One afternoon, she called me into her office and closed the door. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with false concern, "I hear you've been having some trouble adjusting to our workflow. I need you to understand something. You are putting your entire career at risk with this crusade. You need to fall in line, or you might find yourself unemployable in this city." That was it. That was the moment my world fractured. I looked at her sitting there so smug and untouchable, and I knew I could not be a part of her corrupt system any longer. My name, my license, and my conscience were attached to this organization, and it was becoming a stain I could not wash away. I went home that night and typed up my resignation. I was leaving not because I was beaten, but because I refused to become like them. But as I walked out of that office for the last time, a part of me felt like a failure. Karen was still there, still in charge, still preying on the elderly. And I had been powerless to stop her. The next few months were some of the lowest in my life. Quitting a senior position without another job lined up was terrifying. The professional world is small, and I was paranoid that Karen had followed through on her threat to blacklist me. I sent out dozens of resumes and got few responses. I burned through my savings, feeling the pressure mount with every passing week. I questioned my decision constantly. Had I been foolish? Had I thrown away a decade of hard work over a principle that nobody else seemed to care about? I felt adrift and powerless, my confidence shattered. I had tried to solve the problem by confronting it head on, and I had failed spectacularly, making my own situation so much worse. My nemesis, Karen, had, when she had driven me out and faced no consequences whatsoever, I finally caught a break, a job opening in a different state just across river. It wasn't in financial planning directly, it was with the government. It was a position with the state regulatory agency, the very body that enforced the rules Karen so brazenly ignored. It felt like a sign. The pay was less than what I was making before, and the work was less glamorous. But it felt like a chance to rebuild on solid ground. I took the job, and for the next 5 years I dedicated myself to it. I learned the enforcement side of the industry inside and out. I became an odd forensic accountant of the financial world. I learned how to spot the very tricks Karen had perfected. I moved on. I built a new life and a new reputation for being tough but fair. The memory of Karen and her warning faded into a dull ache, a reminder of a past failure. I had to accept karma. I told myself would sort her out someday, but I never really believed it until the email landed in my inbox 5 years after I had walked out of that office, defeated. An urgent all hands on deck bulletin went out from the head of our enforcement division. A firm in Portland, Oregon had accumulated an unprecedented number of consumer complaints and red flags in the system. The allegations ranged from predatory sales tactics to gross mismanagement of client funds. We were sending a full team to conduct a top-to-bottom audit, and they needed every experienced agent they could get. I scrolled down to the name of the firm, and my heart stopped. It was her branch, Karen's branch, a cold dish of Revenge had just been placed on the menu, and my name was on the reservation when I walked through the doors of my old office. It was like stepping into a ghost story. The decor was the same, the faint smell of stale coffee was the same, but the atmosphere was thick with fear and anxiety. Karen was there looking 5 years older. And a lot more frayed around the edges. She didn't recognize me at first. I was just another faceless regulator in a suit coming to tear her life apart. My new boss introduced me as one of the lead investigators on the case. I saw the moment of recognition flicker in Karen's eyes, followed by a wave of pure panic. This was my climax, not a loud shouting match, but a quiet professional dismantling of her entire corrupt empire. I was assigned to review her client files, her records, her entire history for the past 5 years. I started by requesting a specific set of dusty boxes from the archives, the ones from my time there. I opened the first box, and right on top were my old written complaints to the regional director, stapled to the very files I had flagged as problematic. I spent the next 4 weeks in that office, a ghost from Karen's past, methodically combing through every single record, and the evidence was overwhelming. She had not only continued her old tricks, she had gotten bolder, more reckless, pushing the boundaries from borderline criminal to overtly. So I found dozens of cases just like Mrs. Gable's. I tallied up the fines, the penalties for every violation. Numbers climbed into the stratosphere. The new staff she had hired were terrified and overworked. They had been trained in her corrupt methods and had no idea how to do the job correctly. In a surreal twist, I ended up spending my afternoons training them on the proper procedures, showing them how to fill out the forms correctly, how to conduct a real risk assessment. They were grateful, relieved to finally be doing things the right way. On the final day of the audit, I sat across from Karen in her glass-walled office. She looked like a deflated balloon. I slid the preliminary report across the desk, a thick binder detailing years of deceit. The fines are going to be substantial, Karen, I said, my voice even and calm, and we will be recommending the immediate and permanent revocation of your license. She just stared at the report, her face pale. You did this? She whispered. You never let it go. I leaned forward just slightly. No, Karen, I said, you did this. I just came to collect the receipts. The resolution was swift and total. Her business was shuttered, her license was revoked, and she was facing millions in fines and a dozen civil lawsuits from the families of clients she had swindled. Her career was over. I had found the last bit of strength I needed, not in anger, but in quiet competence. I had risked everything years ago by walking away, and in the end, that decision was what put me in the perfect position to finally bring her down. My new normal is a lot like my old one. I still go to work every day and I still believe in the rules, but now I am the one who holds people like Karen accountable. I was rewarded not with a bonus or a promotion, but with the deep, profound satisfaction of knowing I had protected countless people from her greed. And I had proven to myself that one person who is willing to do the right thing can make a difference. Sometimes I think about that last threat she threw at me in her office all those years ago. You're at risk of losing your career if you don't fall into line. It's funny in a way. She was right. She just had the wrong person in mind.